What makes some people achieve extraordinary results, while most get lost along the way? That question has echoed for centuries, and perhaps the answer is not in modern productivity books, but in the ancient temples of China. For centuries, Shaolin monks were recognized as symbols of unshakable discipline, absolute focus, and mastery of both body and mind. They didn't live surrounded by distractions. They didn't rely on apps to organize their lives. They shaped their existence around a code that still remains one of the most powerful sources of wisdom for anyone seeking clarity and inner strength. This code was never written in self-help manuals or shouted in motivational speeches. It was transmitted from master to disciple, repeated through gestures, postures, and training sessions that seemed impossible for an ordinary human being. It was never just about fighting. It was never just about meditation. It was the perfect integration of body and mind, silence and movement, suffering and enlightenment. And here lies the central point. Shaolin monks never saw discipline as punishment. They saw it as the inevitable path to freedom. Now think about our world today. Freedom often looks like having unlimited choices. But this avalanche of choices leaves us paralyzed, unable to stick to a clear path. The monks understood something we've forgotten. True freedom comes from the ability to choose one path and remain on it, despite pain, distractions, and obstacles. And this is where their code starts to become incredibly relevant to us. The first principle of this code is simple but profound. Life is training. There was no separation between what they did inside the temple and what happened outside. Every act, from sweeping the floor to practicing kung fu, was a form of discipline. They viewed each moment as an opportunity to strengthen the mind. That alone is a powerful lesson we can rescue today. We often think of discipline as something reserved for special moments, at the gym, during study sessions, or while trying to break a bad habit. But for the Shaolin, discipline was breathing, eating, sleeping, waking up. Every gesture was part of a greater construction. The second principle, collective support. Contrary to the romantic idea of the lone warrior, monks never trained in isolation. The temple was a living system where each one observed and supported the others. One person's mistake was corrected by the group. One person's fall was a warning to the others. This teaches us something powerful. Great results are never the product of isolated effort. We need to be surrounded by people who share our values, who correct us when we drift, and who inspire us to continue when motivation disappears. And then there's the third principle, the one that most challenges our modern mindset: resistance to pain. The Shaolin knew that pain is inevitable. So instead of running from it, they turned it into an ally. Physical training included enduring impacts, holding exhausting postures, and facing extreme conditions. But it wasn't just about building stronger muscles. It was about teaching the mind that suffering is not the enemy. It's the passageway. Those who run from pain remain fragile. Those who embrace it become unbreakable. Now you may be asking, how can we apply this in a modern world full of distractions, fatigue, and constant pressure? That's exactly the reflection we'll go deeper into soon. But first, understand this. You don't need to shave your head, move into a temple, or learn kung fu to apply the Shaolin Code. What's necessary is a shift in perspective. Discipline is not a cage. It's the key to breaking free from mental clutter and paralysis. When you begin to see your day as a training ground, when you realize that your environment directly shapes your inner strength, and when you stop running from discomfort and start using it as a teacher, you're taking your first steps on the very same path these masters walked. The goal of this video is to open that door for you. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore how the Shaolin Code can be applied directly to your daily life, your studies, your work, your body, and your mind. And if you've made it this far, I invite you to subscribe to the Kokoro channel, because this is just the beginning of a journey that could completely change the way you deal with discipline, purpose, and clarity. The Shaolin monks believed that body and mind are inseparable. To them, there was no idea of training the mind first and then the body, or the other way around. It all happened together, like two sides of the same coin. If the body weakened, the mind faltered. If the mind broke, the body followed. That is why their training was so radical, so different from anything you might see in a modern gym or in casual meditation practices. Physical training started with postures that seemed impossible to hold. Imagine standing in a deep horse stance, thighs burning, knees trembling, and staying like that not for seconds, but for minutes, sometimes hours. The pain was unbearable for most, but for the monks that pain was the lesson. They also ran across rugged terrain carrying heavy loads, jumped continuously until their legs gave out, and practiced with weights that tested the limits of endurance. Then came impact training, striking wooden posts, conditioning arms and legs against hard surfaces, learning to absorb blows without collapsing. But here's the point. This wasn't just about building stronger muscles. It was about teaching the mind to stay steady when the body screamed to quit. The Shaolin knew something many of us ignore today. If you can endure discomfort in the body, you can endure the discomforts of life. That is the bridge between physical strength and mental resilience. Now contrast this with the modern world. We are obsessed with comfort. Softer chairs, faster delivery, easier solutions. The moment we feel even the slightest inconvenience, we want to escape. But this obsession with comfort has a cost: fragility. We break too easily. A small obstacle feels like a wall. A harsh word feels like an attack. The Shaolin monks trained for the opposite. They didn't run away from hardship. They created hardship. They placed themselves in difficulty to prepare for anything. And that's why their code still matters. Their mental training was equally demanding. Meditation was not a casual 5 minutes of silence before bed. It was a test of unwavering attention. Often monks would meditate while holding exhausting postures, forcing body and mind to remain calm under stress. The mind had to be like a mountain, still immovable no matter what storms passed around it. This produced razor-sharp clarity, the ability to act without hesitation when action was needed. Compare that to our daily reality. Our minds are scattered. A single phone notification is enough to break our focus. We sit down to work or study, and 5 minutes later, our attention is hijacked by something trivial. The monks trained the opposite. Hours of inward observation, thoughts rising and falling without attachment. Over time, they built a focus so sharp that nothing could easily disturb them. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of their discipline was what I like to call the invisible training. Not everything happened in the courtyard or during martial drills. Much of their practice was in daily tasks: sweeping, cooking, carrying water, tending the garden. These weren't chores. They were training grounds. Every act was to be done with full presence. No rushing, no distraction, total awareness in every gesture. That was the true school of discipline. This is where we face our conflict. In our lives, everything is divided into blocks. Time for work, time for study, time for rest. And while we do one thing, our mind is already on the next. We work thinking about resting. We rest thinking about work. The result? We are never fully present in anything. Discipline slips away because we scatter our energy everywhere. The Shaolin monks solved this with simplicity. One moment, one task. Whether sweeping or fighting, whether cooking or meditating, each was treated with the same sacred focus. Another part of the conflict is our relationship with results. We crave fast progress. Learn a new skill in weeks, master a career in months, change your life in a year. But the Shaolin saw time differently. Results were irrelevant. The process was everything. Repetition wasn't boring, it was transformation. Practicing the same movement 1,000 times wasn't a waste. It was refinement. It was the difference between doing something and embodying it. This is where their code confronts us the hardest. We are trapped in a culture of speed, where patience feels like failure. But they remind us that excellence is the fruit of patience. The question is, are you willing to repeat without applause, to endure boredom, to continue even when no one notices, until mastery becomes inevitable? The truth is, Shaolin monks weren't born extraordinary. They had the same bodies, the same doubts, the same fragile beginnings as we do. What made them different was their willingness to live under a code of relentless discipline every single day. Their greatest enemy wasn't fatigue. It wasn't even pain. It was the weakness of the mind that wants to quit too soon, and here lies our mirror. The difference between us and them is not in biology. It's in training. They train to transform discomfort into strength, repetition into mastery, ordinary tasks into sacred practice. So the real question is, can you do the same? Can you transform your life into a training ground? Can you treat each act as a chance to build presence and resilience? That is the challenge. That is the conflict. And if you dare to answer it, you begin to live by the same code that carried the Shaolin monks through centuries. We've looked at how the Shaolin monks trained their bodies and minds with extreme discipline. Now it's time to bring those lessons down to earth, to translate their code into something we can apply in our everyday lives. Because wisdom only matters if it can be lived. The monks didn't train for the sake of tradition alone. They trained to embody strength, clarity, and purpose. And that is exactly what we can take from them today. The first lesson we can practice immediately is to treat every activity as training. The Shaolin never separated life into sacred and ordinary. Sweeping the courtyard was just as important as practicing martial forms. Cooking a simple meal was as meaningful as meditation. Every act carried the same weight because each one shaped the mind. That's where discipline begins, not in extraordinary moments, but in small ones. You can start right now. When you study, instead of complaining about distraction, see it as training for your mind. When you exercise, don't view it only as building muscles, but as strengthening your willpower. Even when you wash dishes, organize your desk, or answer messages, treat it as practice in presence. If you commit to this shift, you'll notice discipline growing in places you never expected. The second lesson is about collective strength. The Shaolin monks thrived because they trained together. They corrected each other, supported each other, and carried one another through difficulty. We often underestimate how much our environment shapes our discipline. You don't have to join a temple, but you do need allies. Surround yourself with people who share your vision of growth. It could be a friend who studies with you, a colleague who pushes you to perform better, or even an online community that values consistency and self-mastery. When you align yourself with people moving in the same direction, your path becomes stronger and clearer. The third lesson is perhaps the hardest. Make peace with discomfort. In our culture, we avoid pain at all costs. We seek shortcuts, softer experiences, ways to escape the grind. But growth never comes without discomfort. The Shaolin embraced hardship, not because they loved suffering, but because they understood it was the doorway to transformation. The next time you feel fatigue while working on a project, instead of quitting, recognize that this is the very moment your discipline is being tested. When you feel resistance before a workout, see it as the opportunity to train your will. When criticism hurts, let it become fuel to harden your resilience. Discomfort is not your enemy, it's your teacher. And this leads us to one of the deepest truths of the Shaolin Code. Freedom is not doing whatever you want, whenever you want. Freedom is mastery over yourself. Most people today believe that having endless choices makes them free. But that illusion creates paralysis and confusion. The monks understood that real freedom is found in narrowing your focus, in choosing one path and walking it with full commitment. Discipline, then, is not a prison. It's the key to liberation. How can you apply this right now? Start by writing down a personal code. It doesn't need to be long. 3 or 4 principles are enough. For example, I will be fully present in every act. I will not run from discomfort. I will value discipline over motivation. I will walk with those who share my values. This kind of code, repeated daily, reshapes your life. It works not because it's written, but because it's lived. That was the Shaolin way, not theory, but practice. Another element we must embrace is patience. The Shaolin didn't expect results in days or weeks. They knew that true transformation takes time, repetition, and perseverance. Excellence doesn't come quickly. It comes inevitably to those who refuse to stop. So don't expect instant change. Expect gradual growth. If you begin applying even a fraction of the Shaolin Code today, in months, you'll notice new clarity and focus. In years, you may find yourself completely transformed. And finally, remember this: Shaolin discipline was never only about personal strength. They trained to serve, to protect, to inspire. Their focus wasn't on ego, but on contribution. And this may be the most powerful lesson of all. Discipline is not just for you. It's for the people you influence, for the example you set, for the lives you touch. Strength is empty if it doesn't serve something greater. So here is my invitation to you. Don't watch this video and then move on as if nothing happened. See it as the beginning of a new code for your life. Turn your days into training grounds. Use every act as practice. Welcome discomfort as a guide. Choose clarity over distraction. And never forget, discipline is not about restriction. It is the path to real freedom. And if you've stayed with me all the way here, I want you to mark your presence. Write in the comments, "My body and my mind are one." That way, I'll know you as someone who not only listened, but committed to walk this path of focus and discipline.